Are you a pessimist or an optimist? When it comes to talking about the future, optimism versus pessimism is a novel, if not entirely helpful, philosophical conversation. On the one side, you have optimists, who claim to be happier because they focus on what's good, or potentially good, in the world. And when, inevitably, reality fails to live up to their grand expectations, optimists pride themselves on the ability to see the silver lining, to see what's best in the situation, even if it's not as good as what they planned or hoped for. Pessimists, such as myself, I'll own that, we argue that we have a happier outlook because we are constantly expecting the worst to happen. We may hope for the best, but we are always planning and preparing for the worst. And when you are always ready for the worst, some of us would argue, reality is always a pleasant surprise. It's always better than what you were expecting, but our confidence rests in being ready for anything. And then there are folks who claim to fall outside of this dichotomy. They want to be difficult when you ask a simple question about whether you're an optimist or a pessimist. So they might say something like, oh, well, I am a realist. I base my hopes and expectations on what's most likely to happen. I have a friend who's an actuary, and he loves these people because realists never actually base their decisions on what's most likely to happen. They just convince themselves that what they want to happen is the thing that's most likely to happen. Las Vegas also really loves realists. And then there are people who come up with their own terminology. I met a woman recently who I was having the optimist-pessimist conversation with, and she said, well, I see myself as a depressivist. And I said, that is not even a word. And she said, true, but the way I look at life is I expect the worst, and then what happens is always worse than I was even planning for. All logic aside, in fact, the person clearly was not expecting the worst. If there was something worse than it, she had her own understanding of what she was and felt that she fell outside of the pessimism-optimism discussion. Now, thousands of studies and millions of words have been dedicated to questions regarding optimism and pessimism. We want to know if one is healthier than the other. We want to know if humans are predisposed to be one or the other, or if our environment has some kind of impact on which one we are. Do people accurately identify themselves when asked, or are there self-declared pessimists who have a sunnier outlook on life than self-declared optimists? There isn't much real consensus regarding any of these questions when it comes to thinking about the future. But psychologists do appear to be mostly agreed that when it comes to the past, we are all pessimists. It turns out that no matter what your life has been like, if you think you have had a mostly good life, if you remember your childhood fondly, or if you think your life has been terrible so far, your childhood was the worst, it does not matter how you feel about what has gone on in your life, chances are your most strong memories, the ones that you remember most vividly, that you tell with the most detail, are all things that you perceived as negative at the time. You might tell them with glee now. They might be this funny story about that thing that happened, you remember the thing, and you'll tell it, and you'll have a good laugh over it, but chances are, at the time the thing was happening, laughter was far from your mind, except maybe someone saying, you know, someday we're going to look back and laugh at all of this. They were right. Of all my birthday parties, I remember my 7th birthday the most vividly, because its marks are on my body. That was the birthday where my brother picked up a rock rock, and it struck me in the back of the head, and I got to go to the emergency room and get 3 stitches. There's a bald spot right about there. I can remember that birthday party. I can tell you what gifts I got. I can tell you the theme of the party. I had themed parties, apparently. It was pirates, for those keeping track. My sister was princesses. We had birthdays. Mine's the 3rd and hers the 4th, so we did joint parties because my parents were cheap. I can remember all of these things. I can remember I was playing on our computer at the time, and I went outside and I accused my brother of having a crush on the older sister of one of my friends who was there for my birthday, and he picked up a rock, and I ran away, and he threw it, and it landed on my head, and then I went to the emergency room. And I do remember what happened in between there too. There was no concussion. That is the one I remember the most. I had 27 birthdays, and that's the one that sticks in my head. Literally. Of all the World Series moments that have ever occurred, the one that people remember the most, and the one that Red Sox fans especially remember the most, happened about 30 years ago when a ball trickled slowly past Bill Buckner's leg, paving the way for the Mets to win the World Series. It's a treasured memory of mine, even though it happened before I was born. And no good childhood story is complete without that thing that was a huge embarrassment or disaster for one of your siblings or friends. We delight in telling these stories. We are, at heart, a negative-minded species, which makes Paul's instructions to the Philippians difficult to fathom.
Rejoice in the Lord always. Again I say rejoice. Let everyone see your gentleness. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything. Instead, in every situation, through prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, tell your requests to God. And the peace of God that passes all understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is worthy of respect, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if something is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things.
Rejoice. Always. Are you kidding, Paul? Now, there's never a good time to talk about this passage. No matter when you select this passage to talk about it, there is guaranteed to be a number of people sitting in the church for whom the idea of rejoicing is the furthest thing from their minds. And today, I know, is no different for some of you. But what Paul says here is not exactly an instruction to be happy all of the time. Rejoicing and happiness do not necessarily go hand in hand. And Paul is careful with his words. He's hedged his bets a bit. So the first thing that he does is he says, rejoice in the Lord always. Not rejoice about all of the things all of the time. Rejoice in the Lord always. Because Paul believes with all of his heart that God is good all of the time. There is never a time when God is not good to us, when God does not love us, when God does not care for us and want what is best for us. And so no matter what else is going on in our lives, we can look to God and say, at least I got that. That is worth rejoicing over. That is something I can celebrate. I am a beloved child of God, and that alone is something about which I can rejoice. But then he gets a little more specific, and he starts talking about whatever is true, noble, just, pure, lovely, commendable, excellent, praiseworthy, all those nice, happy, positive adjectives. And here is where Paul manages to nail something that scientists are just figuring out this century. You see, the reason reason that we tend to be negative as a people, the reason those negative memories stick in our minds, the reason we always can look back and pick out all of the times we've been wronged, but have a lot of difficulty remembering the times good things happened, is because at the time something happens, the less good you feel about it, the more you are going to think about it. When something goes wrong, we need to analyze. We need to figure out what exactly happened, maybe so we can avoid it again, maybe so we can have a pity party, maybe so we can make sure that when we tell the story, oh, you would not believe what just happened, I was in the place and the thing, and whatever our reason is, we need to ingrain every single detail of the bad thing that happened in our minds. But when something good happens, unless it is unremarkably good, just incredibly, very, very, very good, so good that we can't believe it, if it's a normal kind of good, we just take it as is. We don't want to question it or analyze it, because if we question it and analyze it, maybe it won't be as good as we think it is. We have all these expressions that we toss around when we start talking about good things that happen. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth, because for those of you who are not educated in horse trading, looking a horse in the mouth is how you tell how old the horse is. So a gift horse might be old and frail and about to die. Don't look it in the mouth, just take the gift. At the very least, you have horse meat for your dogs. That was a real thing. But we don't want to focus on the good. We want to just take it and let it happen, unanalyzed, unexamined, and just allow it to be. While every time a bad thing happens, we need to figure out what's going on. And because we have devoted so much more of our thought and our time to the bad thing, our memories say, oh, that's important. I got to remember that. Well, that good thing that happened, well, they spent 10 seconds thinking about that. That's not important. I can throw that away or just log a couple minor details. And Paul has the solution. If good things happen in your life, if noble things, lovely things, excellent things, praiseworthy things happen in your life, think about them. Focus on them. Study them. Examine them. Think of all of the ways that these things are good, and your memory will read them as things that are important to keep. Each of us probably has one or two or three, possibly more, events in our lives that were just so good that we had to focus on them and think about them and ponder them. And I'm seeing smiles go across faces, so clearly those memories are bubbling to the surface right now. But they are so outnumbered by all of those negative things we fixated on, because the day-to-day good that we experience comes and it goes right back out without us thinking about it. So I have a simple challenge for you. It is the challenge that Paul has given. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is just, whatever is pure in your life, if anything is lovely or commendable or excellent or praiseworthy, think about it. Examine it. Let it to stay in the front of your mind. And when it remains there, and when you have thought about it, and you have examined it, it will stay with you. And when it stays with you, your outlook on life, your outlook on what has been done before, and the path that your life has taken can shift drastically. And no matter what else is going on in your life, remember that there is one good thing that each and every one of us has, and that is a loving God who cares about each of us.